Good afternoon, everybody. We are here to present to you the CCMA's webinar, Build a Better Break Trip Starting from Scratch, with Lianni Castro, and she is the Assistant Director of Campus Ministry at Dominican University of California. She has served the Dominican for the past 6 years, and prior to that, she went to graduate school at Villanova in Pennsylvania, where she received her MA in theology and participated in the campus ministry internship. It is there where she gained valuable experience in planning break trips and immersion experiences. And when she got to Dominican University, which is also her undergraduate alma mater, she built a one trip program into a three trip alternative spring break program and added an international immersion experience to El Salvador. So I'd like to introduce to all of you and turn over the reins to Lianni Castro.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for being here today and taking some time out to learn how to build a better break trip or how to start building a break trip for your program. I do want to encourage everybody to ask any questions that they may have throughout the discussion. Your insight is also welcome if you'd like to add any other tips during our time together that maybe you found really helpful if you already started building a program. So I want to start today with a story about a student that graduated 2 years ago, and his name is David. David participated in 3 service experiences through campus ministry throughout his 4 years, and he came to Dominican as a business major with his major focus on athletics and playing sports. Soccer was his main sport. And like many students at 18, he was really unsure of who he was and how he wanted to live his life. But as he grew at Dominican and opened himself up to new experiences, he became much more self-aware, and he discovered that his true passion was teaching. So now he's currently in his second year of Teach for America in New Jersey. And last year, I received an email from him in the spring, or actually earlier this year, that was really touching that I want to share with you all. This trip changed me, and I still hold that place dear to my heart. Sometimes when I browse through Facebook and see the beautiful people that went on the trip with us, I begin to reminisce on the time spent there. I mostly think about the people I met and, of course, Josue. Today I was reminded of him again. I learned that I will be getting a new student in my class who recently arrived to the United States from the Dominican Republic. Tomorrow will be his first day in school. It's just amazing to see how different people live here compared to somewhere like El Salvador and somewhere like Marin County. It's not fair, Lianni. Place matters, and I am beginning to realize that sad reality. Teaching has been the most challenging thing I've ever done. Some days I don't think my students deserve a first-year teacher like myself who is constantly making mistakes and is still learning. Nonetheless, I wake up every day, prepared or not, ready to love my kids. I haven't forgotten what you in campus ministry did for me. You made it possible for me to have this life-changing experience. I think it's so important that students see and hear the world from a different perspective. I read this quote recently that said, "If you're always talking, you're never learning because you are repeating things that you already know. But if you listen, you might actually learn something." I think it's important that everyone, especially undergrads, learn to listen. So this is why I believe that these experiences are really vital and important. I believe in the power of immersion and the transformative impact that it can have on participants, especially our students. And I just wanted to start off with that story to center on, the reasons why we do this trip. It's the service, but it's also the impact that it has on our students. With that being said, I just wanted to introduce myself a little bit. These are some pictures of some of the trips I've been on. The one on the bottom left is the most recent, where we went to a habitat trip in Yakima, Washington. We first started with just a Tijuana trip to Casa de los Pobres, where we work with the poor down in Mexico, and we talk a lot about border issues. I want to begin by saying that relationships matter, and these trips are all about relationship. The relationships that we build with our students and the relationships we have with those that we consider other. The relationships that are built during our service are what help to create compassion They help our students develop empathy, and hopefully it's what helps students to understand the impact that they have on others through their decisions and the responsibility that we have towards one another as global citizens. So today we're going to cover, there's so much to cover in terms of like starting a break trip from scratch. I was a little overwhelmed with what to put into this, but I came up with, so creating a blueprint, going with our building theme, the logistics of planning a trip. I'm going to go through how to organize some tasks, how to prioritize tasks, and more of the parts that are somewhat easy to overlook when you're first starting out planning. Next, we're going to take a look at tools and materials and go over checklists of what needs to be done before a trip, during a trip, and after your trip. I will also go over some ways that will help you to craft a memorable and educational experience, and then have a couple little tips that I wish I knew when I was first starting out. And there's going to be time for question and answers throughout our discussion. So first of all, I just kind of wanted to get a feeling from you all about like who is just starting out on building a break trip. So I don't know if Deacon Frey can count a couple of people. Like if you could put a type of 1 and say that you're just kind of starting out to build a program, or 2 if you are have a program already and you're just looking for more tips that you'd like to improve your program. I'm not sure if that's possible. Let's give a little bit of time.
Okay, Lianni, we have Paul's 2, Kate 2, Catherine first time, Caitlin 2. So 3 2s and a 1 so far.
Great. That helps me a lot to kind of see what I should talk about more. So here we go. I'm creating a blueprint. Many times the most difficult part is just getting started, and there are lots of questions as how to begin or where to start. And one thing that I want to emphasize is that there's so many different ways to do a break trip, but the main thing is that you're going to be learning, and the students are going to be learning in whichever one that you choose. So as you can see, there are domestic and international, and trips that are more focused on tasks, or trips that are more focused on social justice, and many world issues that could be your main focus. Also, you can choose to work with specific organizations, or, you know, is it a mission trip? Is it going to be faith-based? Is it a service learning trip that you're working with faculty with on your campus? These will all intersect and interweave to create your specific program, and there's lots of ways to hopefully embed it into your campus, or to make sure and build partnerships across campus. So there's pretty much endless possibilities, but one thing is that you have to answer is these 3 important questions. So where are you going? What will you do? And how will you make it meaningful? So some questions to think about when you are trying to decide what to do and where to go is to think about, you know, the needs of your students and some of the things that maybe you focus on as a university. You know, do you have a strong nursing program? Do you have a really strong social justice office, an engineering program? At Dominican, we have a really strong nursing program. We do not have a strong social justice program, and we don't have engineering or anything like that. It's more a liberal arts college. So are there weekly or monthly service sites that often fill up? If you have a service site maybe to St. Vincent de Paul, working with the poor, or Habitat for Humanity, and those are the trips that always fill up, there's probably some really great insight into what your students are looking for and how they want to serve in their community. I know I have to think a lot about what countries are the most affordable for our students, because we want to make sure and offer an experience that the students are going to be able to pay for, and that is going to be equitable for students that maybe are in a higher socioeconomic situation and those that are not. So kind of keep those in mind. And then, are there present partnerships already in connection with your university? Maybe your science department has a program that works with water, or your nursing program has somebody that's a connection. Our trip to Tijuana, Mexico, when we go down there, we work with the Dominican Sisters. She has a program and a community center. So that connection really helps the students to see a more global worldview and to see what other people who are connected to the university are doing in different ways of service. So after this, after answering those questions, you're ready to start building your trip. And I know that I am not at all a type A personality. I'm very fully relational, and my strength has not always been in being detail oriented. So the best thing that I've found in organizing these trips is creating checklists for myself and timelines. So this is by no means an exhaustive checklist. I'm going to be sending out some more information in the toolkit, which Krista will send you, so that you will have a more in-depth look at what are some of the things that you need to make sure and do before your break trip and during and after. So before the trip, creating a working budget, and then like travel logistics, publicity, and application, schedule, and meetings. I'm going to go over a couple of these things. So budget and expense report. Coming up with how much it will cost, and not forgetting about, you know, some of the things that we tend to forget about, like are we going to have t-shirts? When we have meetings before the trip, are we going to be buying dinner for our students? Are we going to have snacks? And then even just tips. When you go out for dinner, if you're, you know, going out to a restaurant, you know, how much are you going to tip? Or if you are in an international immersion where you're staying at a community home, is it necessary to tip? And then the question of, are you going to be able to provide scholarships, and how will you fund? I know that all of our programs have different budget needs and have different ways that we provide our experiences for students. But one of the first things that you have to do is really look at the cost and be clear to the students about how much it's going to be, and what the commitment is going to be. So travel and logistics, the main things, how are you going to get there and where are you going to stay? If you're planning on building a break trip where you are doing a grassroots kind of program, where you are making a connection in either another country or somewhere here in the United States, then you're going to have to come up with all of those details. For example, contacting maybe churches or affiliates that you have from the university to stay in community centers or in churches or in parish centers, and then making sure you get rental cars. Are you going to need flight information or flights? One thing that we do is we have an alumni that is a travel agent that helps us out, and I build that into the budget so that it's easier. Most of us are wearing many different hats, and maybe alternative spring break trips or immersion trips are not the only thing that we do in our job as campus ministers. So some things you can embed into your program so that you don't go crazy with all of the details, and you have time to focus a little bit more on your pre-trip learning and community building with your students. So working with an organization may provide, that provides housing and food and transportation while you're there, is sometimes a really great way to get started so that you are not planning every single detail of your trip. Although that's something, if you want to do, you just have to have a lot more organization and planning that goes into it, and you'll be having a really strong partnership with whoever it is that you're planning this immersion experience with. So don't forget about passports and visas. Make sure you check all the resources online. I'm going to have a sheet that has some checklists of passport information that you can send to your students, example emails about medical immunizations. With travel insurance, some universities, through their global education offices, have travel insurance that's already built into the university. So I would suggest that you check in on that and see if that's something that you can utilize. Otherwise, there are websites that are, you can purchase that travel insurance and have your students buy that. And that's another thing to go back to the budget to make sure that that's included when you tell your students how much the cost is. So publicity and getting the word out, one of the most important things is making sure that the students know about the trip so that they'll apply for it. And if you're just starting out, the university emails and distribution lists are a great way. We have our very own newsletter in our campus ministry program. Faculty and staff partners, I very regularly send emails to certain staff and faculty members because their relationships with students are really important in terms of, a student will not necessarily apply for a trip if they see a poster, but if one of their favorite teachers asks them and says, you are somebody who I think would really benefit from an experience like that, they're much more likely to attend. This is an example of a flyer that I've used in the past that has some pictures of the trips and then all of the information on it. So eye-catching, fun, something that gives information but is something that will catch their attention quickly. And of course, don't forget about the social media aspect. This generation is definitely all about Snapchat and Twitter and Instagram. It seems like you have to find like 12 different ways to reach them on all of this social media. And sometimes they're still even like, I never heard of this before. So it just depends on how you do it. The most important way of getting out publicity to your campus is word of mouth of students. For those of you that have already started to develop a program, one of the best things that I have found is when the students create their own videos, when they do a, what is it, sorry, I'm losing words right now. When they have a presentation that they give to the campus, that's one way of doing it. I've had students in the past who will hold a post-trip dinner and invite their family and friends so that they can share about what the experience meant to them. And, for me, it's all about kind of what the students are most dedicated in doing and how they want to spread the word about the impact of the experience. So they are the most inspiring people in terms of getting their peers to participate. So embedding publicity into your program, I require the students who receive a scholarship to create a flyer, a video, or to post on their social media when they return. I also go through that in the reflection on the last night, which I'll talk about later, and creating a small 2-sentence explanation of what it is that they received from their trip. So after doing all that, I'm wondering if there's any questions at this point.
Okay, so if anybody has a question, please raise your hand, or if you'd like, you can always type it into the question box, and I'll be happy to pass that on to Lianni. So we'll take a moment here, see if anybody raises their hand. Okay. I think you're doing such a good job. Nobody has a question yet, Lianni. So why don't you continue on? If I do get one, I'll, at an appropriate time, I'll jump in.
Perfect. Thanks, everybody. Yeah, embed a post-trip presentation into the requirements for your students. And what I've started doing is having past student participants hold the info sessions when the applications go out. So application and student selection, I'm going to put in the toolkit also an example of our application. I have a somewhat of a different one for the immersion experience than I do for the alternative spring break trips. With the 3 alternative spring break trips that we have, I have one application that they have to turn in, and they get to select which ones they most would like to go on out of the 3. The deadline for the applications is important. I think when I first started out, I really tried to be strict with the deadline for applications. Every once in a while, I would allow students who have late applications to turn them in. but I wanted to make sure that these students were going to be dedicated because it's for us, it's not curricular. They're not getting a grade for these experiences. You know, they're going really because it's something that they want to add to their college experience. So there is an element of dedication that needs to be had by the students in terms of agreeing to come to pre-meetings and um, making a commitment to do fundraising and being just pretty much fully committed to the experience that they're going to be taking. And of course, personally reaching out to students and inviting them is key. So the pre-trip meetings, what's the purpose of your meetings? The purpose of the meeting is strictly community building. And of course, you have to add in details and logistics so that students will feel like they're fully informed about what they need, um, what they're going to be doing, whether or not it's going to be a direct service project or whether or not it's going to be more of a immersion experience in terms of listening to people tell stories and nonprofit organizations, panels and things like that. So I try and mix it up with my pre-trip meetings. I make sure and have a model that they can follow that's also going to be continued on the trip. So starting with a reflection of some sort and a prayer, um, making sure to go over some context and history about wherever we are going. One of our trips is more focused in environment, and they work with children. So making sure that the students have a couple ideas about the program that we're working in. Um,
Lianni, if I could interrupt you here.
Sure.
We have a question from Caitlin, and I don't want to get too far into your presentation. She asks, how far in advance do you have students apply for the international trips you offer?
So I have an international trip that is a winter immersion in January, and my applications are due at the end of this month. So September 30th they're due, and that's because I tell students that we have to buy plane tickets. It's mostly going to depend on the requirements of the organizations that you're working with. I work with Crispaz in El Salvador, and since we've been working with them for about 3 years, we make reservations a year in advance, and I make sure that we have enough, at least 3 months to buy plane tickets. And doing it early also ensures that if any students do not have passports, that they can send and expedite a passport if they need to. Our alternative spring break trips that happen in March, I do applications due in November because I want to have at least 2 meetings in the winter and then 2 meetings in the spring. Some people that might have fall break days, I would do an application very, very soon, within 3 weeks of them getting to campus. And that's something that as you start, it's going to be difficult to have them do, like, remember that there's an application due. But as you build your program, students will be looking for those things. They'll be saying, hey, our spring break application's out yet? Is the El Salvador application available? I try to make it pretty similar each year so that there's not too much changing every time.
Great. Caitlin, I don't know if you have a follow-up. I'm going to unmute your microphone in case you do. Okay. Thank you, Lianni, if you'd like to continue.
Right. So the other tips, after selecting the students, so for El Salvador is different because it's only one trip that we have. So I will just make sure and have an all participant meeting to welcome them and talk about maybe some fears that they might have, the motivation for why they went on the trip, and then just introductions. For our alternative spring break trip program that has 3 different ones, I want to bring those students together so that there's a sense of solidarity and so that there is an understanding of, like, these are the other students who have decided to go on a trip. And of course, with more students comes more viewpoints and more insight from why they do service or how it's affected them in their life. So doing different types of reflections for your pre-trip reflection is really important because it's going to kind of give that large space for really fun and silly times and then more serious and in-depth conversations. I always try and talk to students about the importance of discomfort in terms of when you have moments of being or uncomfortable, that those are moments for growth. So I try and encourage them to share, even if it makes them just a little bit uncomfortable. I don't want them to feel unsafe ever, but to tone set in those moments about growth and sharing wisdom with each other and with the group. And of course, I'm sure you all know, have food. That's just one of the big things. Everyone always wants to have snacks and food. And if you're going on a trip that is to another country, you might want to do some sort of a potluck, or you can plan to make a meal that is culturally based in the country that you're going to be serving in. So I kind of put this in here just to see if there's any other questions, but just want to pause here really quick if there are any.
Okay, once again, feel free to type in a question or raise your hand. Raise your hand would be the quickest way at this point.
I am going to be talking a little bit more about reflection further on in some of the slides.
Okay.
Perfect. So during the trip, these are usually the things that I have on my checklist of like what I want to do during a trip. Notice that there's not really a checkbox for the action of the trip. So for example, going on a Habitat for Humanity trip, I don't necessarily say that it's one of our goals on our checklist to build, a certain amount of the house that we're doing. I think that the most important thing is the reflection element that helps them to see the importance of not just their service, but of solidarity and the reason why they serve. So building community, educating for justice, creating safe space for dialogue, and then it's really, really important that you do a reflection every single day, even if it is a short one, to give students room for that kind of discussion. And of course, leave space for grace. A lot of times I think we try and control the situation on these trips because it's they can get, people get tired and people are, all coming from different places. But to leave some room during the trip for that grace to kind of seep in and the importance of checking in throughout the trip. So I made a little bit of a diagram about what I think makes a meaningful experience, and the intentional preparation that you do before the trip is just so important. I found, though, that you can do as much in terms of like historical learning and context and kind of a more academic sense before the trip. And because the students are so just present in the reality here, a lot of those things don't necessarily seep in until they leave and get to their service sites and start, meeting people and working on their service. So while I always would encourage you to educate for justice and to definitely go over history and culture of the places that you're going to, be prepared that when you get there, a student will say, I never knew this, because it doesn't always sink in because they have so many other classes and things that they're focusing on. All of these things are just ways that I have found make a meaningful experience, and being intentional about touching each one of these is something that I have found in planning these trips. They've kind of just come naturally, and now even just writing this out, I was like, these were all things that I didn't necessarily intentionally create, but because of wanting to make a meaningful experience, this is how they presented themselves in the trips. So direct interaction with the community you're serving. Make sure you have fun and memorable moments. The students will laugh about these things for a long time, and it also complements, like, service is a part of your life. It's not just something that you do if you're a missionary or something that you do as like a life dedicated to only service. It's something that you need to embed into your everyday living. So educating for justice, this is something that for me, I'm still working on in my trips. Um, I think when Paul talks about forming leaders, and I'm not really going to touch on that since he's going to do a whole webinar on that, that he might talk a little bit more about how to get your students more educated about justice. And so some of the things that I use are short articles and videos, things that are going to engage the students so that they'll watch it together, and then we can have a short discussion on that. And we can practice what it looks like and what it feels like to have a dialogue with varying opinions and different worldviews. So when you're on your trip, the panels and talks with people and nonprofits is going to be really important, because that's one of the ways that students really start to empathize and understand, oh, this is really different from maybe where I come from, or I never saw that perspective before, or that perspective never made sense to me before. Don't be afraid to look at those challenging topics on current issues and to approach those in a way that the students will feel safe in talking about them. When I put the details to consider, make everyday moments into learning moments. I see a question here. I'm going to answer that after I finish this slide. So making everyday moments into learning moments. For example, if you are cooking dinners together, to create a night where you talk about people who live on under $2 a day in our world, and you challenge them to create a meal, go to the grocery store, split them up into groups and give them $2 or $5 each, or $5 a group, and have them come up with a meal together. That's one way that they really are like, wow, that is something I never thought that people have to do. And again, at the bottom, talk about embracing discomfort and living in solidarity. I suggest leading an activity that focuses on privilege and entitlement, so that they can start talking about some of the ways that their own prejudices form their outlook on life, and how we can change those to be more open-minded and to be more empathetic. So a question from Catherine: as far as budget and students wanting to go to another country, Mexico is the closest out-of-country experience, and do I have any resources or advice on traveling to places where security is a concern? Absolutely. I know that for us in campus ministry here at Dominican, we would not fly or go to a country that the United States has a no-fly, like they put out a no-fly warning. For example, in El Salvador, I know that there was a warning put out for the country because there's heightened violence. Since the organization that's there, we have a good relationship with them, we can have that honest conversation about, is it unsafe to bring our students to your country? And usually what it is that there's a heightened violence warning, but it's in pockets of the country. So if we know that we are not going to be there, and that the organization is really, really intentional about safety and being with you during all steps of your trip, and they take all the precautions necessary, then I would go on the trip. I've definitely canceled trips before. So for example, to Tijuana a couple years ago, it was really bad, and it would not have been safe for us to take students down there, so we canceled it. Um, I would say that you would have to talk to your, I mean, use your best judgment. Absolutely. The most important thing I'd say is that to have a relationship with somebody who's there who can be really honest and tell you whether or not the situation is um, safe for your students. And of course, when traveling, you have to go over, um, you know, you have to go over with your students what's culturally appropriate and what is not, and be really aware of, your belongings, of, are you holding your camera in your hand or your cell phone? Like those are things that we don't want to stand, and telling them that they shouldn't bring jewelry. So all those kinds of things that are precautionary. Um, that's pretty much what I have on traveling to places where security is a concern. If you have major concerns, I would say not to go there. But that's if you have somebody who's telling you like, oh, it's a little iffy. But if you know the community that you're working in and it's a really respected community and you have a leader that is going to be with you the whole time, most likely it's going to be fine. And I tell parents to give me a call if they have any questions, or if they're nervous about their student visiting another country. And most of the time, they just need to hear that you're taking the precautions and that you have safety in mind with their student. So more about daily reflections. So reflection really is the key to transformation and understanding. Um, Definitely allow for laughter. This past year in Yakima, I have a tendency to be more serious during reflections, and I know that you need to be able to have the laughter, especially when you have intense experiences, um, because the suffering is a part of life, and challenges are a part of life, and it helps. I think it helps our students to learn more coping mechanisms of having intense emotions and feelings and witnessing moments that totally challenge their worldview. Reflection is going to be key in helping those students to work those things out. And a lot of times they have these kind of mind blown moments where they kind of have that everything that I've known is a lie, or everything I've known is so different from what I thought, or even having guilt, to be able to work through that so that they're not frozen in a place where they're so overwhelmed that they don't feel like they can do anything. Um, and knowing too that as a group you're all feeling those kinds of emotions. So some details to consider, just logistically, where will you have reflection? Is there going to be a space at the place that you're staying in that's going to be conducive for good reflection? I always ask the um, volunteer coordinators that I'm working with. I make sure that they know that I have a group of 17 students and we're going to need a comfortable space that's conducive to good reflection. And of course, we're flexible and we'll work with what we have, but that's just something to keep in mind, especially if you show up and there's not really a space. It's better to know beforehand that you can request for those kinds of things. I suggest to do something really simple and fast on the very first night, because everyone's tired, especially if you've been traveling. You don't want to do something super deep. I will put in the toolkit some of the ideas and some of the things that I use that are some of the best reflections that I've done that are quick and easy and get students focused on being there and being present. I always suggest having affirmation bags. It's a fun thing that students really like, and it's a good takeaway for them to remember their experience. Um, bring simple art supplies uh, it's only because it's fun sometimes to do a reflection where they're doing some sort of artistic endeavor. And since all students learn in different ways, doing a little art project can be something that really helps one student um, reflect in a way that they might not in having just like a discussion or a conversation. Um, let's see. Encourage journaling. On the El Salvador trip that I take, I actually have the students design journals for one another, and it's a secret all throughout the trip. and they've come to really, really enjoy that. And we also talk about, it's fun to stalk somebody that you don't know on your trip and have lots of really funny things in their journal. And it's a great way to get to know each other. That's a reflection element before you even go on the trip, and a community builder. Let's see. So during the, wait, hold on. Okay. During the trip, some other important tips, make sure people sleep. The students will want to stay up all night if you let them, but I say on the very first night that, we want to make sure that our energy is good the entire trip. So encourage them to go to sleep at a reasonable hour. I make our sleeping quarters a silent area so that they're not coming in and talking and keeping people up that want to sleep. I try to have a space that's quiet and for people who want to go to sleep early, and then have a space for people who want to stay up and write affirmations. If you are doing cooking duties, like assign those cooking duties and chores on the first night. Makes it much easier. For things like if you have a shower schedule, make sure that those things are decided early so that the students know what to expect throughout the whole trip. So important. Know your own strengths and weaknesses as a campus minister. If you know that you will get grumpy, on a 10-day trip on day 6, and that you need an hour, like take that hour. Tell the students you're going to go grocery shopping, or even just like have a space, hopefully that's going to be silent, and just let them know that you need to take a little bit of a moment to reground or to rest. And I don't know, I found that that's been really important for me. The students are going to be tired, especially if you're waking up in the morning. So let's see. Yeah, so just be aware in your scheduling and in your itinerary that the students are clear about kind of when they're waking up in the morning so that they know how much sleep to get and everything. Always bring a first aid kit. Set expectations about cell phones. Some of these things are best set from the students themselves so that we are not the ones who are doing all of the rules. The students are the ones who are writing out expectations for one another and community expectations and roles. That's something that you can do before the trip and write together. Cell phones are only going to be allowed when we are at our, our homestays or whatever, or at our home for the week. And during meals and everything, not allowed. When you go abroad, that's a different story, and you don't even have cell phones, so that's something that you can just decide depending on what trip you're doing. Being aware of group dynamics and group mood. Usually before a trip, I set up kind of so if it's a 6-day trip, I plan out the reflections for each day, but I know that I have to be flexible. If we have a day where it was just super intense and the students are tired, and I can see on their face when I say that we're going to have reflection that they just are kind of not up for it, do something that is more lighthearted. Do something that is going to, kind of give their brains a rest and let them enjoy time together. Just be aware of the group mood. Don't try and push them into doing something that's going to make them, frustrated or grumpy or anything like that. So this is one thing that I learned in El Salvador. Never underestimate the power of a bag of M&Ms mid through a trip. For some reason, the students just go really crazy about it. They really, especially if it's a surprise and you haven't really had candy the whole time, you start your reflection and you bring out a bag of M&Ms, and they just, they're so happy about it. I try and do it on the third to last night. That's usually when some of the separation anxiety starts to creep in, and they're starting to get tired because they've been staying up late, and different things. So always bring a bag of M&Ms on your trips. Reflection on the last night. I touched on this a little bit. So I would make sure that on the last night of your time together, that you have a reflection that focuses kind of on bringing everything together and being able to, for the students to articulate the impact that this experience had on them. Whether it is having a specific question in journaling time about, you know, if somebody, or when somebody asks you how your experience was, how would you sum it up in 2 sentences? Or 3 words that most exemplifies the impact that the experience had on you. That way, the students, when they go home, there's not as much of a feeling of being overwhelmed at trying to tell somebody the entirety of their experience. They have something that's already prepared, that they feel really good about, that gives them a chance to share with somebody, and ask them to always invite that person that's asking them about their trip to a post-trip reflection or something like that. Be prepared for separation anxiety. There is something that happens on that last 3 days that is very tangible. So I even just tell students about it, that if you're starting to get tired and frustrated with each other, that it's natural, and to be aware of it. And if you can on the last night, schedule your post-trip meeting and your reunion so that they have something to look forward to and know that you're going to be getting together again. You know, journaling tips, journaling and group hugs, those usually come out a lot on the last night. Does anybody have any questions about the reflection portion that I just went over?
Okay, once again, please just raise your hand if you have a question. Paul, your microphone is open. Go ahead, please.
Lianni, sometimes I try and encourage reflections that students can think about throughout the day. Do you ever do anything where you present a passage or a question in the beginning and have them reflect on that through their work, and then have the students really lead their own reflection at the end?
Yeah, absolutely. I like to do, like I was saying, like a variety of different types of reflections. So to start with the question in the morning, to have them have a buddy throughout, either a different buddy every day that they talk with, or one main buddy that they have throughout the entire trip. That's kind of their person that they share with. Like if you have drives and you're on the way somewhere and you've just had an experience somewhere, posing a question before you get into your van or your bus, and then making sure that the students have a little bit of a discussion that way. I also, on the first night, will tell them that the first 2 nights of reflection I'm going to plan and model, and then the rest of the nights we're going to sign up for. So 2 or 3 students will have one group, and they will lead reflection for that night. And that's a really great way to empower the students and have them thinking about, okay, what did we do today, and how do we want to discuss this with the group, and why was it meaningful? A really wonderful way to get them involved, and to do it in advance so that they know kind of like, okay, today's our day. We're going to be looking for ideas for reflection tonight. Yeah, thanks, Paul. That's really great.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, it's back to you.
Thanks. So after the trip, so group presentations are really, really good to have because it gives them something to, the students especially, to work on. And I've done things like where the students would invite parents and friends and family, especially if they've had fundraising. I'm sorry, I forgot to touch on fundraising earlier, but if the students have done letter writing, or if the students have had, if there was a donor that helped to provide scholarships, to invite them to that, because that helps to build your programs stronger It helps to get more awareness about it with your alumni and with your campus community and with other students. So doing some sort of group presentation is really wonderful. And it also brings awareness to whatever service it was that they participated in and the people that they met, so that they can tell the stories that they learned about and heard on their experience. Group reunion, usually have some sort of, maybe a couple actually, maybe 2 or 3 group reunions, so that, especially if it's, so for example, a January service trip to El Salvador, throughout the spring semester, I'll try to have 3 meetings with them so that we can go over how has the experience been settling in now that you're back in your own kind of like real life space. You know, how has it changed for you? Is there anything that you're struggling with? And we talk about reverse mission. So the idea of reverse mission is something that I learned while working with Crispaz, and that is the idea that we have 365 days in a year, and if you do a 10-day service trip, sometimes we think that that's all we need to do, and the rest of the year it doesn't have anything to do with the 10 days of service that we did. But with the reverse mission, the mission that you're doing doesn't just occur in the 10 days that you're on your experience. The reverse mission is what you do with the experience when you go home. So what is it that you're doing with the other 355 days of the year because of what you've experienced in your immersion or your service trip? And I have this discussion with the students so that they know that sometimes it's the little things, sometimes it's being more aware of issues and being more social justice aware. It's planning an event, perhaps. There have been, when I went to Villanova, there were definitely some nonprofit organizations that were started by students because of their break trips that they had and how they wanted to continue their partnership with a place. And so for example, like Water for Waslala, they go to Peru, I think it's Peru, and they build wells there and they use their engineering program. And those are things that were born out of students who continued to reflect after their experience. You know, the letter that I talked about at the beginning from David, I can see that he continues to reflect on that experience. So we have to model how to we have to model how the students continue to learn, even though their experience was a year ago or a couple months ago. And the what now. Depending on what you do, is there an active component to what you want your students to do from their experience? So is there a club that's going to happen that students begin that focuses on, you know, service in Appalachia? Or is there something that starts, you know, if you're at a Catholic institution that's maybe Augustinian or Jesuit, is there a way that you can link your mission to what you do on your trips? So those are just kind of some ideas after the trip to help your students to continue to learn. And of course, doing evaluations just for data purposes for your programs is always important as well. So things I wish I knew when I started. Partnerships with faculty and staff is so important. They can really be cheerleaders for your program, and they can pinpoint students that you have no contact with to encourage them to apply. Utilizing grad students with expertise and desire. Sometimes I don't have enough drivers for my habitat trip, and one of the best things that I have found is reaching out to graduate students and faculty and staff, but graduate students who have had a common experience of going on trips and have experience with leading as well. Make pre-trip meetings mandatory. That's not something that I started out doing, and the students wouldn't come to them if I said that it's, you know, oh, by the way, we're having meetings. No, it's written into my application that the pre-trip meetings will be mandatory. Of course, yeah, be patient with your program. If in the first year you only have six people who apply, take those 6 people and give them an amazing experience, and in the coming years, it will totally grow. Something that Paul mentioned too, empower the students to lead during the trip. He's going to talk more about that in his next webinar. And always have a reunion. I've led trips before where I've seen students that participated, but I never did anything that was intentionally set. And it makes a huge difference on, one, how the students view their experience, and two, how they embed it and how they incorporate it into their everyday life. They need that support afterwards to really continue to serve throughout their life and continue to honor the trip that they had by living a life that's maybe a little bit different from what it was before their trip. So one of the most other important things, call other campus ministers with expertise and experience. Don't be afraid to reach out and look up a school that's in your area or a school that you've heard has a really robust program and ask that campus minister about what they do and how they do it. That's kind of how I started out doing things. And if I had a question, I would ask people for example applications, lists for service sites, how do you reserve your plane tickets, all those kinds of things that are details and logistics. You've already taken the first step to listen to this webinar and to build a program from the ground up. So yeah, make sure you call their campus members. And then questions. That's all I could pretty much fit into this presentation.
Oh, thank you very much, Kate. Leanne. So any questions? We have a few more minutes left. If we can take a few questions for Lianni. Just raise your hand. It's probably the easiest and quickest way. I feel like that bad teacher. Raise your hands. Okay. Well, I think you covered, and I know we have a number of upcoming webinars that will expand on yours. So first of all, on behalf of CCMA, Lianni, thank you so much for your time and presentation and preparing for your presentation. I just wanted to give you some information about what's coming up. Please be sure to join us for the next Build a Better Break Trip webinar, October 15th at 2 o'clock Eastern Time, Framing in Leaders, November 17th at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, Bringing in the Furniture, Kitchen Sink 2, and December 1st at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, Pilgrimage 101. If you have a topic you'd like to hear, or a topic you'd like to present, feel free to contact CCMA's Krista Bollinger at Bollinger, that's Bollinger, at ccmanet.org. And we'd like to thank all of you for being here today. This presentation will be available online shortly. You just watch for your emails from Krista and also the toolkit from Lianni. So once again, Lianni, thank you very much. You have anything you'd like to say before we wrap this up?
Thank you, everybody. Also, if you have any questions, my email is just lianni.castro@dominican.edu, and Krista can send that information to you as well. But please feel free to reach out if you have any questions about any of the material I've talked about, or just any questions that maybe I wasn't able to address in this webinar. So thanks, everyone.
Very good. Thank you again, everybody. Thank you, Lianni, and we'll see you all at the next CCMA webinar. Have a great day.